everybody to another exciting edition of Transformers Reviews. Well everyone, this is the first part out of a three-parter in which we are going to be looking at reuses of unique molds. And today, as you can tell, we are taking a look at the Botcon version of Scorponok from their Pirates vs. Knights set. Now, if you're wondering just which Scorponok this is exactly, this is actually the cartoon G1 Scorponok. Now, we know this is him because if we look at the bio that he came with, because it not only addresses how Lord Zarak used Cybertronian and Nebulon technology to create Scorponok, but also the fact that this boy at one point in his life did have a city mode. And that again is the cartoon Scorponok's backstory as opposed to the Marvel Scorponok in which he was just a normal sized dude. Now, one thing you may be noticing in particular is his little partner down here. Now, this is not Lord Zarak. This is actually the son of Lord Zarak, known as Olin. So he actually inherited his position as the headmaster of Scorponok from his dear old dad. And I do have to say, there is something very interesting about this headmaster, because if we look back at the Generation 1 headmaster for Zarak, you notice it's got its own unique design and how it turns into just a portion of Scorponok's head. Well, look at that one, and look at this Zarak. And if you're noticing how the boys look a little bit different, that's because it actually has to deal with this guy right here. And you're like, well, what does Cerebros have to do with this? Well, this is the 2001 Takara release of the Headmaster components for Fortress Maximus. In the original Generation 1 cartoon, this bot was actually Cerebros, with the Headmaster being Spike. If we look at this picture of both Olin and Spike, instead of using the original Lord Zarak Headmaster, they reutilized Spike's mold as opposed to the original Olin Zarak mold. That would canonically and logically make more sense. So, future MJ Lee here editing, and I did want to go ahead and mention this, that regardless of which Headmaster they were going to use, they had to resculpt the face to give it this traditional animation look. So, again, that's just further proof that they could have used the Lord Zarak mold instead of Spike. Now, because the only thing that technically did change on this mold was the first front part of the face, you can actually attach Scorponok to the Cerebros / Emmisary body, but I don't know why you would, because it just looks weird. So we will come back to our boy in just a minute, because we obviously know that he will play an important role later. And in the meantime, we're going to be looking at this mold right here. Now, for anybody that knows the history of this mold, it was originally the Energon Scorponok. However, look at some of the fantastic detailing on this boy. I mean, I love the wild and wacky original Scorponok colors on this guy. But one thing that was always cool about this was he had these just giant claws that you could literally grip an entire Autobot. That's how crazy and big his claws were. And again, because this came from a 2004 era mold, whenever missile launchers were a thing, you could go ahead and slide both of those forward in this boy, but you go ahead and get your finger out of the way and he can launch it actually pretty decently for both of his claws. And moving back to the main portion of the body, you can see that he does have the mechanical scorpion bits on the front half, and then it transitions into some sort of industrial tractor look with a cockpit and the smokestacks, which you can't turn them up like you would expect. They literally have to point forward. I mean, if they're laser cannons, that's cool, but to me it always looked like smokestacks instead. Down here, he also has the treads for his legs. Now, they can move out and you can move them up and down. So if we go ahead and look here at the back of his vehicle mode, you notice the laser cannons that he has on both sides of his legs. And if you are noticing, there is a speaker box, because on the original Scorponok, he did have electronics. Now, for all the Botcon releases, they removed all the electronics. And whenever we get to looking at ones like the Energon Optimus Prime that was re-released as Year of the Snake, we'll notice the same thing, that whenever these get re-released as exclusives to save on the cost, they always gut the electronics. Now, the other part that we're going to address right here is the fact that obviously his tail is going to form some sort of cockpit later, but it does have this little aesthetic hook bit, again, feeding into the industrial machine look. So, I mean, yeah, he's kind of Constructicon colored and has Constructicon details, but at the same time, he's still obviously a Scorpion. However, if you do recall from the beginning, I had mentioned that he was part of the Pirates versus Knights set. Now, which group of pirates did he exactly come from? Well, would you be interested to know that it's actually the Star Seekers? And as you can see here with this picture being basically the centerpiece of the set, I think that he looks awesome with the modern Star Seekers that we have. Now, I do have Lockdown as well, although I kind of feel he needs to do his own thing akin to his animated counterpart. However, if you want to see what the entire group looked like, well then here you go. Again, with Scorponok being the biggest boy here, he kind of has to sit in the center and everybody else just kind of fit in around him. And so basically this is my iteration of the Star Seekers. And I like this kind of group shot because it looks like they're all getting ready to head out and pillage and plunder. Yeah, it looks fantastic. So like I said, our boy would come back into play later, and if you're kind of wondering, well, does he integrate with this Scorponok in any way? We have seen a lot of fan iterations because if you pull up the cab section right here, there is a small little void that if you wanted to, you could go ahead and stand Olin up right here, and it kind of works, but again, it makes him very exposed. And really, I think it just boils down to whatever your personal preference would be. And the last thing that we're going to look at here in Beast Mode is actually something that I mentioned in Shockwave's video during the Shock Blast portion, is that all of the Energon figures actually had these areas where their spark crystals were very visible, with whatever allegiance being Autobot or Decepticon visible in the spark crystal itself. And then in the storyline, basically they would attach Energon stars in that particular area to like increase their power. And as you can see here, Scorponok was no exception. And while they have removed the Decepticon sigil from the spark area, that molding for the Energon chip does remain. So if you happen to have one of those Energon era chips, you can still go ahead and attach it, and according to the lore of the series, apparently it's supposed to power Scorponok up a little bit. However, let's move on to one of his more interesting alt modes. So, as we already addressed with Scorponok, he did have to give up his city mode. Well, for some fans, they didn't like the fact that he had to give up one of his more iconic forms. They essentially said, we'll see about that. And that is how this fan mode was born. And, you know, you can kind of roughly see it as a city, because if you look along this section, yeah, that's the ramp. Here the legs are the towers. And really, if you're going to look at this, even though this fan mode was made long before the Grain of Rice Transformers came out with like the Arc and Unicron, they are about the only ones that will scale with this city mode. And while I did want to include this, I don't personally put him in city mode. Whenever I display him, it's always in one of his 3 official modes. Which, speaking of, let's move on to his vehicle mode. Now, if we move on to his official jet mode, I have to say that this is probably my favorite mode out of all of them for this Scorponok, because I just like big alien looking jets. In Scorpion mode, these blades are mostly collapsed in, and you can kind of do that for robot mode too, but here in jet mode I like to make sure that even if it's just a small adjustment, that it flares it out, again sort of giving that illusion of the wings. Now, one detail that you couldn't tell whenever these were in the industrial Scorpion mode is these turbines were kind of tucked on the insides of his feet. And you can see here that, I mean, that's some excellent level of detailing. Now, if we move up here, I love the orange cockpit. That's kind of cool. The 2 guns on the front, man, it just gives this thing an aggressive look. And you can see that in jet mode, even if these are supposed to be laser cannons as opposed to smokestacks, it works in conjunction with this boy, giving him at least 4 main cannons in his jet mode. Yeah, this is definitely my favorite mode of his overall. So how does he scale with a Voyager class boy? You can see that, yeah, he's still pretty good size. Probably roughly about twice the size of Ferak here in vehicle mode. You can imagine like these boys like flying along, just being like, you know, sorry, my 5-year-old's coming out there, but yeah, man, that would look sick with these boys just raining death and destruction down from the sky. Man, I kind of wanted to see like a animated Star Seekers cartoon right now, just a bunch of Transformers being pirates. So here we can see our boy finally reaching his robot mode, and kind of makes me wonder, what will you look like with his Headmaster friends? And as we can see here, oh boy, I tell you what, just the 3 of these, seeing these 2 boys reunited with their boss, the head honcho himself, man, this just looks sick. And it does astound me because remember that this is a 2004 Energon mold with these guys who are, I believe, 2017 molds. And they just look stellar together. I think probably the thing that cinches it is the new Headmaster component on this Scorponok. It just makes everything else about his design fall in line to where it doesn't contrast too crazily. However, I did just want to show you what he looked like reunited with some of his goons. So in looking at this Scorponok, I want to point out some of the unique details on him. And the first being these hip blasters down here. That they're very subtle, but I think the reason that I kind of dig these particular ones is it does kind of remind me of Beast Wars Megatron and Big Convoy. That they were just characters with so much firepower that they literally had hip-mounted weapons. And I kind of dig that. Now, something that you might have clocked on this guy is the fact that both his shoulders and his arms are rather limited in what they can do. So let's say that you wanted to go ahead and bring this arm out in front of his body. So in order to do that, you would actually have to go over here and raise up the shoulder itself up against the head, rotate this all the way down, and if we go ahead and try to put the arm down, you'll see that this shoulder is still remaining higher than this one over here, and that's due to the fact that how this arm is molded, it's actually hitting up against that hip blaster. So what you have to do is you have to go ahead and pull the arm into its firing position wide open in order so that the shoulder can actually come back down to be level with the other one. So if we go ahead and bring the other arm into the same position, go ahead and make sure that both the missile launchers are pushed forward. However, you do have to have his claws massively open. And I don't know whether this is silly or awesome. Maybe it's somewhere in between. I guess if you had to compare it to somebody else that has to open their hands to fire, that is an Iron Man thing. So, but then again, he doesn't have claw hands either. So I don't know if that actually equates or not. However, one thing that I will defend is the fact of how he can use his tail in robot mode, and I am absolutely digging that. And kind of like this, I guess in conjunction with the hand blasters, the fact that he has 4 giant cannons that he could just obliterate you with, that is kind of cool. However, this boy is not completely devoid of posing. And in this position, it kind of feels like maybe Scorponok is trying to rally other Decepticons to his cause. So I like the fact that he has some capability. However, what if that capability is used in conjunction with other figures, such as his fellow Star Seekers? And here we can see these pirates on board their ship, with Captain Cannonball taking the lead. And as we can see, our boy Scorponok is there on the back, because not only is he the biggest out of all these guys, but he is also the muscle of the group. And here we can see them all from another angle getting closer to their goal. I love how Ferak looks like he's actually brandishing his pirate pistols. That's actually a pretty cool look. And in this last shot, we can see the entire crew, Scorponok included, like they're getting ready to jump aboard an enemy vessel and raid it for all it's worth. So, the Star Seekers do not play around. And why stop there? As we can see here, here is a Decepticon governor, Skystreak, who on the planet he's been entrusted to oversee, lives it up like a king. However, the Starseekers do not care, and they are showing Skystreak the alternative should he refuse. However, as we can see, Cannonball has not only the golden trident, but also the crown that will make nice additions to the pirate treasury. However, we can see here that Insecticons, much like pirates, love to hoard their own supply of precious items. However, Scorponok and Ferak are prepared to mow their way through a bunch of bugs to get the Energon. And after a little bit of successful bug smashing, we can see that our boys will depart happily with the Energon. And here we can see the Autobot Night Prowler guarding the Scepter of the Primes. And despite the fact that he is the Guardian, he still is in possession of a big, shiny, valuable object. To which the Star Seekers not only send their most powerful in the form of Scorponok, but also the most efficient at retrieving Lockdown.
Gotta hand it to you, you're good. I'm impressed.
And as we can see, the pirates do come off victorious, not only taking the scepter, but Lockdown as a little bit of a bonus, got some additional upgrades.
Of course, you know what I really live for. Hunting trophies.
And here we can see the revived Cliff Jumper, who himself knows all too well the dangers of Dark Energon. Regardless, he has taken it upon himself to prevent anyone from taking the Dark Energon Cube. And because of that, we see our girl Filch here taking cover behind a rock because she dare not explode the Dark Energon with a stray shot. Which leaves it up to Scorponok to emerge from the ground, taking Cliff Jumper by surprise, much to Filch's twisted sense of amusement. And with the Autobot opponent no longer an obstacle, this pirate duo happily leaves with the Dark Energon Cube. However, the pirates have higher goals by intending to take the Orb of Vector Sigma, with only the ancient Autobot Alpha Trion to guard it. And despite his legendary status, the Starseekers are not deterred, because apparently it takes more than one to fight a frail old man. Now, because these guys are scumbags, after they retrieve what they initially came for, they take a moment to work Alpha Trion over, showing him that this is no Cybertron for old men. And here we see the crew reunited, and after all their raiding, in which Scorponok did about half the work for them, you can see that their acquired pile of loot is rather impressive. So pretty much everybody, that was our look there at the Botcon Pirates vs. Knights version of Scorponok. Again, this is the first out of 3 parts. The next one that we're actually going to be looking at in the series is actually the Year of the Snake Optimus. Now, that's not necessarily the next video, the reason being that I'm going to fit in this 3-part series wherever I can in between other videos that I want to go ahead and shoot. If you all saw recently on the channel, I put up a poll and let you guys help me decide what to do with the new Legacy animated Motormaster that I picked up the other day. And as you can see here, you guys definitively answered that question. So guess who's next on our video docket? And with that being said, everybody, that's basically all I've got for you this time. So until next time, guys, we'll see you in another review.
Scorponok, transform! It will take more than your pathetic little dogs to stop Skullcruncher!